And welcome back to another edition of the On the Board Sports Podcast. I am your host, Will Chiarucci, a.k.a. Will C., coming to you from Long Island, New York. And it's Saturday, which means that it is the end of the NFL draft. All 7 rounds are completed. All 3 days are done. And there's lots to talk about. But first, I want to introduce my co-host, Shawn Thomas, a.k.a. Shawny on the mic. Shawn, how are you?
Well, I'm doing good, quarantine in Queens, New York, but for the most part, I'm doing well. How are you doing, sir?
Doing all right. Can't complain. Beautiful day. Had to go out for a ride and got to see a lot of people out today. Beautiful day with the weather and everything like that.
Nice
hearing about the draft picks, too. So that's pretty epic. But we have another very special guest with us. Joining us, he is a veteran of this podcast, and he basically – we went to school with this man. He's now a cop. He's essential workforce. He is the one and only David Goldstein. David, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you guys having me on. So unfortunately, we got to do it through, the means of the video conference, because I'd love to be in studio with you guys. I had a ball last time when you guys invited me down to the studio, and hopefully next time we do this, it'll be in person.
Absolutely. David, how are you making out through all this, first off? Because, cops are deemed essential. I know you're doing your thing out where you are in Suffolk County right now. So if you could just tell us how you're making out.
Yeah, thankfully, everything's going well. Obviously, we're keeping busy. The confirmed cases, you want to say, that's what the reports are telling us. And also, I see it on the 911 calls that we get, and things are definitely better than they are now a few weeks ago, and hopefully things stay on a steady decline and we get some kind of return to normalcy because, as we're going to talk about today, the NFL, the draft has come and gone, and that means that the only thing left is summertime, OTAs, training camp, and then eventually live games.
And you look at everything right now with regards to the NFL. NHL ain't coming back anytime soon, it looks like. NBA, same thing. Baseball, they're talking about July 4th. We don't know. Really, the only thing that's going on here with fans in general, which might start up in September, starting up on time, is football. So, David, you alluded to that earlier. We're going to get into the NFL draft, though, right now and talk about the whole draft in general. And we know that the Cincinnati Bengals came. They got their first overall selection in there with Joe Burrow, second, Chase Young. But really the draft after that started up at 3. We know that the Jets and the Giants got their offensive tackles. Giants got Andrew Thomas, and the Jets got Mekhi Becton from Louisville, and other quality moves as well. So I'm going to start it off with Shawn here. What did you think of both New York teams' drafts this 2020 NFL draft?
Well, since you and David are the resident Jet fans on the show, I'll start with them. I felt they needed to go offensive line. I'm glad they did. Becton, listen, if Becton can keep his weight down, he's going to be a stud.
Right.
But that's a real big if, as David puts on his Jets hat.
I had to make the swap.
Love it. It's awesome.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. But I love the pick, man. Sam has been hurt, both of the season. So coming into year 3, the priority had to be keeping him upright. And a point that we have to keep in mind too, guys, is Joe Douglas did not draft Sam. So we do not know how long of a leash Sam has with Joe, because Joe is not his guy. As simple as that. So Joe is going to do his best job of putting the guys in place to keep him upright. So Becton, the first pick, that was good. And guys, I just feel like overall, the Jets did a solid draft. The Denzel Mims, second round, everybody had that guy first round. To get him after a trade down, because the Jets had, I think, the 48th pick. They traded down and they were still enabled to get Mims. That was good. I'm a Florida fan, so for them to take 2 Florida guys, that's near and dear to my heart. So, and both those guys are really, really good, as Will is doing the chop. That's right, Will. So I feel overall the Jets did a great draft. But remember this name, Bryce Hall. He's a 6'1", 200, I think, like 5-pound guy. He was hurt in college so much, but his tape is amazing. Like, he has, like, Richard Sherman tape. It is a very good tape, but he's always hurt. I know that Greg Williams is going to absolutely love that guy. And so, overall, guys, I give the Jets a solid A. Joe for his first draft, pretty good.
David?
Yeah, another name on top of the ones that Shawn said, Ashton Davis too. People gave I guess it was a red flag for some Jets fans. They felt like maybe this was because you don't know what's happening with Jamal Adams and his future. I don't really see this as a threat, or even a better term would be an insurance plan for Jamal Adams. And really, I'm just excited to see how Greg Williams develops. Ashton Davis taking a safety over there, obviously to add to that tandem of Marcus May and Jamal Adams. But going back up to the top, Becton, he's a fast guy, and I think that to piggyback what Shawn said, he could be a key pass blocker for Darnold, which is something that is so important to keep him up right now. He's going to have a few weapons, which didn't seem that way when the offseason first started for the Jets, but they have added a little bit through the draft and through free agency nicely. He could line up at right or left tackle, probably going to be at left tackle because they have Adoga is going to be on the right side. And then another thing, too, which we didn't talk about, Jets had the 31st ranked rushing offense last season. So I'm curious to see how Becton can become integrated into that running game and maybe impact Bell, because I have one of my best friends, he's a Steelers fan, and the first thing he said to me when Le'Veon came to the Jets is that all of these products, all these running backs, whether it be Le'Veon Bell or who's the current Steelers running back? His name escapes me right now.
James Conner.
Yes, James Conner. That all these running backs are a product of Pittsburgh's offensive line. So I want to see if that's the case, or if Le'Veon Bell, with a little bit of help, because it's not very hard to go up from 31st ranked rushing offense. So we'll see how much Becton goes into that. Going on to Denzel Mims. I mean, he's a great combo of size and length. 6'3", 207. He's going to be a red zone target for Sam, which I love. It's something that he really hasn't had from that wide receiver position. And while I didn't agree with not bringing back Robbie Anderson, feels like a long way away now. You have Rashad Perriman, you have Crowder, you have Mims. Anunwa's future is really not too clear right now, but I'm not going to count him as someone on this Jets team. The only downside I've heard about Mims is that he's still very raw, which coming out of college you'd expect. But again, coachability should be able to correct that. So again, very happy with the Denzel Mims pick. And the one thing, because Shawn, you brought it up. I wasn't going to mention it because you brought it up. I'm a little snake bitten with those third round defensive ends out of Florida. Makes me a little nervous. But the bright side to that is that the Jets only had 25 sacks last year, so they needed to upgrade with a young edge rusher, and I think that could possibly be what Zuniga brings to the table.
And Will, before you go, Will made the post on the podcast page. I wasn't a fan of the James Morgan pick until I really sat down and I thought, and I was like, wait, Sam has been hurt, obviously, both of the seasons that he's been here. And a lot of scouts and a lot of the quote-unquote analysts, they said, look, this James Morgan kid, he could be pretty good. He could be one of those guys that, 4 or 5 years from now, teams wish that they would have took him in the first round, the second round, blah, blah, blah. So for the Jets to get a quarterback that someone feels that highly of, I think it's a pretty good. And as we saw, one of the most important positions in the whole sport is the backup, a quarterback. And obviously, David, on top of being a fan of the Jets, you also an Eagles fan too. And the backup, a quarterback, won Philly the Super Bowl. So the backup, a quarterback, is extremely important in this league.
Way to steal my thunder on that one.
Sorry,
Way to steal my thunder.
Love you, pal.
It's all right, all good. seriously though, with what the Jets did here with the 4th-round pick, and Shawn, you hit it right on the head, nail on the head. But also too, to add to it, why bring in a veteran quarterback that's going to be here for a year, and he's going to learn the offense, and then he's going to leave, and then the next guy is going to have to come in, and then the next guy after that. So you're going to have to go out there and still sign. If they didn't draft this kid, James Morgan, you still would have had to have made a move to get a backup. Now, with that said, New England had him very high. New England had this kid very high on their draft board, and to get him away from New England to back up Sam Darnold right now, huge, absolutely huge. But with that said, for the people out there, I don't know that. That's why 99% of us out there are not in Joe Douglas's shoes. We know that Joe Douglas could go out there, draft a good team, and he's won 2 Super Bowls. He's made it to 3. He knows what he's doing. The defensive end from Florida, big pickup right there. He was a senior, supposed to go out there and was supposed to be a 2nd round or late first rounder, came back to school. Instead, he went back down, but you cannot question the motor of this kid. He's got it. Same thing with the running back here that they drafted from Florida as well. The name escapes me, but realistically speaking here, look, they needed a third down back. That's what this kid's going to be. Almost like a Lamont Jordan type to what Curtis Martin was, as Le'Veon Bell is. So it's a good draft. I didn't mind these picks. I really love the Denzel Mims pick. Again, the same thing with the armchair GM out there that, why did you trade down with Seattle? You wound up getting a 3rd-round pick out of it. And then that 3rd-round pick wound up being 2 4th-round picks in which they got today. So Joe Douglas, like I said, he knows what he's doing. He wants to get versatile guys. And not only that, to just stick with special teams here for a second, David, I know you alluded to Ashton Davis. The Jets haven't had a kick returner in God knows how long. I know Andre Roberts was here for only 1 year. But if you're looking at somebody that had sustained success that got drafted by the Jets as a kick returner, Brad Smith comes to mind. Justin Miller comes to mind. So those are guys that, you could play around and plug around. I love the move. Justin Miller back in the day was a 2nd-round pick. He wound up working out wonders, being a great Pro Bowl returner. And the same thing can be said about Brad Smith. So, again, Joe Douglas hits it out of the park, A+ here, outside of the Mekhi Becton draft for sure. So we'll see what happens here going forward. But, hey, this guy knows what he's doing, and he's trying to build this team up to something in which many Jet fans haven't seen in such a long time.
Yeah, I was going to say I was definitely happy. I give Joe Douglas a thumbs up. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, David. And right before I came on here, I'm not sure if you guys heard, they made a trade with the Colts.
Yep.
And they got another a Florida guy. So and that's a part of the team. Me and Will spoke about this on air and off air. I feel like a part of the team that many Jet fans were forgetting about because they were so caught up in the offensive line and receiver is the Jets cornerbacks. They don't scare anybody. So they had to really upgrade that. So to draft a guy and then to trade for a guy adds 2 more guys into the room. So a real solid 3 days for Joe. My only concern is, do the Jets have the skill guys that are going to scare the secondaries? Because Mims, even though Mims could flash, he's going to be rookie year. Perryman had a good year, but it was only 1 good year. Crowder plays a slot. So it's going to be really, really interesting, but a great day for Joe.
Absolutely. And you get to see what's going on here with the Jets too. Shawn, you mentioned it with the wide receivers here, if they're going to scare them. It's really going to be a system type of offense where, you're going to see these guys going out there in Adam Gase's style of system and just go out there and just try and produce for them. Jamison Crowder, great slot guy. Brandon Perriman is looking to build up on his year. in Tampa Bay the final couple of weeks and trying to build up over there. And Denzel Mims, like you said, Shawn and Dave, this guy was a first-round talent, and he wound up slipping all the way down to 58, and he's got a chip on his shoulder. So this is going to be a really, really interesting year. Plus, dare I say, Quincy Enunwa comes back, perhaps? I don't know. We'll see what happens with him. But make no mistake about it, Joe Douglas, I know everybody here on the board is saying it. 2 thumbs up here from me. So.
Yeah, and also Braden Mann, who I've never heard of the guy. I don't really watch too much Texas A&M football, but the one highlight I saw, I think they were playing against maybe Tennessee, and he was punting from inside his own end zone, and he ends up punting the ball to the other 30. And so all I keep hearing about is how this guy has a boot. Anytime you have a special teamer like that, I think he got the seal of approval from Pat McAfee, which is always good if you're a punter. So, that's one name also to throw in the hat there for the Jets draft.
That's true. Everybody overlooks the punter, and we don't know what's going to happen with their other punter. He's probably going to walk. So, I'm thinking of Ben Graham right now. I know he hasn't played in a long time, but who is the punter for the Jets last year? The name keeps on going out of my head.
I know they recently. I think they've had, was it 2 punters in the last 3 years or
Lachlan Edwards?
Edwards. Yes, that's the one. Yep.
He's on his way out. So definitely, this kid looks like he's going to be the real deal. So really, really interesting there. So everybody gives Joe Douglas the 2 thumbs up of approval. Just the armchair GMs out there on Twitter. My God, these people, and even in the Instagram comments as well. If they would have been so great, they would have been played by the Jets and Chris Johnson, but it didn't happen. That's why they're there, and Joe Douglas is doing his job. So let's just go out there. Bravo to you, Joe Douglas, for trying to make the Jets great again. Moving on now from the Jets over to the other New York football team. No, not the Buffalo Bills. We'll get to them in a minute. But the New York Giants, they wound up going out there and selecting Andrew Thomas, 4th overall. And they wound up getting their safety. For them, smart move. And they're trying to go out there. They're trying to rebuild, trying to give Danny Dimes and Saquon Barkley opportunities to win football games. It's a team effort at the end of the day. And their coach, Joe Judge, is an all 3 facets type of guy, a guy that has learned from 2 great head coaches in Nick Saban and Bill Belichick. So, David, the floor is all yours here since you're the Philadelphia Eagles fan. How did the Giants go out and basically do this NFL draft?
Yeah, this is definitely a draft that I watch pretty closely, and I'm going to try to remain as unbiased as I can about this. But I thought the Giants did have a good draft. I thought they addressed a lot of needs, that being on the offensive line and then also on the defensive side of the ball. I know some people were some people weren't thrilled by that Andrew Thomas pick, which was a little odd to me personally. Like I said, I thought that they kind of hit the nail on the head with that 1st round pick, and then to follow that up with Xavier McKinney. I mean, anytime that you grab one of these guys from Alabama, a high motor type of guy like that, I think is always going to be an A+. Just going down the list here, they grabbed a corner. Pretty much all the places of need I thought really were hit, because you have a lot of teams just throw them off, besides for the Eagles, who, we'll get into them later, but the Packers didn't address a need at wide receiver. There's a few teams that just chose not to build through the draft for a lot of their holes, and I thought the Giants were really one of the teams that understood to get rid of the fumble situation, the fumble issue, or to help that with Daniel Jones, to get a guy like Andrew Thomas in there, and then to try to win some games more through the defensive side of the ball to help out that offense, like I said, to help out Saquon, to help out Danny Dimes. So I liked what the Giants did with their draft as well. I thought both New York teams really did a good job.
Yeah, I felt that they had a very good draft too, but I felt they should have went Simmons at 4, because unlike the other team that we just finished talking about, the Jets, the Jets signed like 50 guys in free agency to play that line, and the Giants only signed 1. So to me, I felt the Giants needed to go quantity. That means so one guy for them isn't going to fix the entire line, opposed to the Jets where Joe signed so much guys.
Mm-hmm.
If he gets that last piece, you add that last piece to the guys that he brought in, it can work. The Giants brought in nobody. So for the Giant fans to expect Andrew Thomas to fix the whole line, I think it's just crazy. And I would have took Simmons at 4 and then use like the second and the fourth pick to get like a tackle in that round, and then a guard here or a center here, so on and so forth. So I would have went that route, but I personally feel that Andrew Thomas, pound for pound, was the best pure left tackle in the draft. He's the one guy that he been there. He blocked for Nick Chubb for 2 seasons and Sony Michel. So he has been on some very good lines. So I like the player. I just don't like the pick. But for the rest of but for the other picks, I felt they did well too. As you said, a safety, I felt that was a great pick because they need that too. So the Giants, I feel they made some improvements, but when you're in that tough the NFC East and you got to play Philly twice and the Cowboys twice and so on and so forth, it's going to be hard to try and get from 4 wins to 6 wins to 8 wins to 10 wins. So so that are the 2 teams. I felt like the Jets had the better draft, but the Giants had a pretty good draft too.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I was going to say, Shawn, about that was that I felt like the Giants really drafted best available at that point, because what happened was you knew Chase Young wasn't going to fall to them at number 4, and then they already addressed the need for corner through free agency. So you had guys out there like C.J. Henderson. Obviously, Jeff Okudah was drafted earlier on by the Lions, but I felt like for who was out there on the board for the Giants at that number 4 pick, I thought that was the best that they could have done as far as best available and need as well.
And you look at the draft, that they drafted Andrew Thomas, drafted Xavier McKinney from Alabama, Matt Pearl, an offensive tackle from UConn, Darnay Holmes from UCLA, Shane Lemieux from Oregon, Cam Brown from Penn State, and Carter Coughlin from Minnesota. Everybody has these guys as like A to B, rankings. So the Giants looks like they did good over here, but Joe Judge has got an awful lot ahead of him. So we'll see what happens there when it comes to training camp and when the season actually starts. All right, guys, since New York is done, in the actual vicinity, New York, New Jersey, we got to go and talk about the other teams that are involved in the NFL. And since David is an Eagles fan as well, and since Shawn is a Titans fan, we got to start off with, as Dave keeps on switching the hats, I love it.
David, man, I love it, bro.
Absolutely. We'll start off with David's Eagles here first, because this is a really interesting draft in which they've had, and it looks as if that there's going to be some competition here with the quarterback play. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is going over to the Philadelphia Eagles. He's going to be backing up Carson Wentz, and it looks as if this is it for Carson Wentz at this point in time. Dave, the floor is all yours here. How did the Philadelphia Eagles do this NFL draft?
Yeah, I'll start at the top. I have a lot to say on the Jalen Hurts thing, but I do want to just go in order.
Go ahead.
So obviously the 21st pick, the Jalen Reagor trade. I'm sorry, not trade, pick. I'm not going to lie to you. When I saw it come across, I was actually following it on Twitter, because as we know, Twitter is the best way to keep up with the draft.
Yes.
They're minutes ahead of what goes on TV.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to see Roger Goodell making the picks from his basement. So I was following along on Twitter, and I was disappointed. The immediate thing is anger. What is Howie Roseman doing? How are we going to botch this pick when we need a receiver for Carson after what happened last season?
Right.
But going back, watching game film, reading what some of the analysts had to say on him, I have a little bit more positivity about this pick. Now, he's a small receiver with a very large vertical, game-breaking speed. You know, that's the big thing you hear about him is the speed that sets him apart. But I kind of feel bad for these TCU quarterbacks. They've been getting dragged since the Rager pick was made. He's had 8 different quarterbacks in his career at TCU. If you look at CeeDee Lamb, he had, Jalen Hurts, Jefferson had Burrows, Judy had Tua. So all these top quarterbacks that were taken in this draft, the receivers are right there along with him. You don't hear anything. I couldn't name you one quarterback that Jalen Rager played for, let alone the other 7 of them. 61.4 of his targets were deemed catchable in his college career, which was 118 out of 120 wide receivers. So if that's not a telling stat to you right there, I really don't know what is. But going back to the top of the draft, the Cowboys with that CeeDee Lamb pick, I think we all know what that's about. That was Jerry Jones getting payback for the Dallas Goedert pick. If you remember back in 2018, the Eagles in the second round, they traded their second rounder and a 5th rounder to Indy, I think, and they ended up getting Goddard, who was supposed to be the replacement at that time for Jason Witten. So CeeDee Lamb goes to the Cowboys. Honestly, that's fine because they're not going to be a team that makes the playoffs, the Cowboys. And is it going to be nice to see Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb line up across from each other? It's going to be a nightmare for secondaries in the NFL. But they had a need at defense that they didn't address in that first round, and they're going to pay for it. They're going to pay for it late in games when they need a defensive stop. But this isn't about the Cowboys. It's about the Eagles, so I'll move on. I kind of felt the one spot where the Eagles maybe could have jumped up and made a trade. I thought Atlanta was a very good trade partner for them at that number 16 pick, one ahead of where the Cowboys took Lamb. So I thought they kind of dropped the ball on that. From what Howie says, there was a steep price, which he wasn't willing to make. So you got to take them what it is for there. Now, the last receiver out of that first round that was not taken by them, Justin Jefferson, again, like I just mentioned, play with Burrow. Great value pick from Minnesota and an immediate replacement for Stephon Diggs. So I thought that was a really good move for Minnesota and a player that I don't think was going to fall to them. So I wasn't, like I said, the initial pick with Rager, wasn't thrilled about it, but I'm starting to come around a little bit. And the Eagles went out there, and you could tell the priority of this draft was speed. They went out there and got faster and got faster and got faster and got faster. Now you go to the Jalen Hurts pick. If Eagles fans weren't upset about that first pick, they weren't going to be happy about that second pick either. I was reading a report from Charles Robinson, who's a reporter for Yahoo. He said that Wentz and Hurts may be on the field at the same time, which I don't like it. I'm not a fan of it. The only thing I can maybe think of is that with Wentz and his injury history, that they're trying to limit the amount of times the ball is in his hands. Maybe they feel like it'll increase the probability that he'll stay healthy. I can't get behind it. I really can't justify it because I do feel that with the exception of the torn ACL with Carson, which even, I mean, he, on the play when he was diving into the end zone against the Rams on that play, he was hit, but a lot of his injuries are contact injuries. So we'll save the Carson Wentz debate for another time. But, I mean, what could you say about Jalen Hurts? He set records at Bama and Oklahoma. And the Eagles got a gamer that hopefully, at least I feel, they hopefully won't need to see the field. The biggest thing that I really am bothered by, though, is the Taysom Hill comparisons, because I don't think that's how he should be used, and I don't think that's how he will be used in Philadelphia. We're starting to see that a lot. The NFL is going to a younger backups, as you guys mentioned earlier in the podcast. Nobody really saw Justin Herbert going to the Chargers. I thought that was a surprise. And I think that a lot of these journeyman quarterbacks are starting to get replaced by some of these younger players that could be developed within their system rather than having to have a journeyman come in, play a season like what happened with the Jets and Trevor Siemian, or even last year with, David Fowles. But going back to the Jalen Hurts pick, could they have addressed something that was more important, more of a need? Yes, but at this point, Eagles fans live and die by Howie Roseman. Going over to the Marquise Goodwin trade, I thought that was a great trade for them. They traded a 6th rounder for him, and even though he's been hurt the last 2 seasons, we know that when he's healthy, he's a threat. We've seen it before, and I was a little surprised because I thought the Niners were going to go receiver to try and place the receiver that left to the Saints. I don't know why his name escapes me at the moment, but you guys know who I'm talking
Sanders?
about. Yes, Emmanuel Sanders, exactly. So I thought that the Niners were going to address the need there. But even going back to the Eagles, though, they took John Hightower out of Boise State, which I've never heard of him, I'll be honest, but there was a lot of excitement, a lot of hype around him. Another speed guy, Quez Watkins, another speed guy. And the last person I want to talk about from this Eagles draft is Kevon Wallace. He's a top 50 prospect that they were able to snag with the 127th overall pick. Eagles fans know a thing or two about safeties from Clemson, so I know that they're excited about this one. They're looking forward to it. Malcolm Jenkins, they decided to let walk in free agency, which I know was a very tough move for Howie Roseman and for the fans alike. I personally thought they were going to get a deal done with Jenkins to finish out his career in Philly. That wasn't the case. So even though the beginning of the draft seemed a little suspect for Howie Roseman and the Eagles front office, I thought that they made up for it big time on day 3.
Yeah, David. So the Jalen Reagor pick. I agree with you. I felt like I think Philly had 3 or 4th round picks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, you know what? I felt they could have traded up to 13, 14, 15, 16, David, as you said. If you had to give up a 3 and a 4 or 2 of those 4s, I don't think that's too steep. So maybe the asking price was maybe a 2 and a 3, and Roseman said absolutely not.
I just wonder if they contacted Denver, because Denver was able to take Jerry Jeudy with the 15th pick.
The 15th pick.
You had the Denver sitting out there. You had Atlanta sit out there. There were teams that probably could have jumped into their spot.
Exactly. And so now at 21, it's like, all right, well, you know, Mims is on the board, Reagor's on the board, T. Higgins is on the board too. But David, I'll tell you why. I like the Reagor pick because Jason Peters is gone. And you're going to have a second-year guy who really didn't play much. And Andre, he didn't really play much in year 1. So my thing is, the blind side is a question mark going into this year. To me, I don't even think they're going to use Reagor as like a deep threat. I think they're going to use Reagor on screens, slip screens, slants, stuff that's quick.
There's a lot of film out there of him on a lot of screenplays.
Right. So I think that Roseman is saying, look, the easiest way to not get Carson hit and the easiest way to hide what could be a weakness is to get the ball out fast. So I think that's why Reagor was the pick over Higgins and over Mims. So I do like that pick. David, I love the Jalen Hurts pick for 2 reasons. Number 1, David, if Carson Wentz gets hurt one more time, I firmly believe Philly is going to try and get out of that deal because he's clearly going to be walking injury, bro. So can Jalen Hurts be the future after Wentz? They must think so because I don't think it's because they want to use him as Hill or use him as like RG3, so on and so forth.
No, he's a winner.
He's right. So I think that they do think that he could be a future guy. My only concern is the fit because you can't run – because to me, you can't run the same O with Jalen Hurts that you run with Wentz. No. So to me, it's like, are they going to have 2 different types of O's? Probably not. Are they going to try and get Jalen Hurts to, you know, learn the O that Wentz knows? Yeah, but that's not his strengths. But with all that said, David, I love the pick because 1, he wins. 2, his legs. Like he can get and with the and so now having the defensive lines just in the NFC East, David, as we saw, Chase Young went second. So he's going to need those legs to get away from Chase Young and Montez Sweat and the Giants guys and, you know what I'm saying, everybody else. So I do think that he can be the heir apparent, but I think this is how he's saying, look, if Carson Wentz gets hurt one more time, we have a decision to make depending on how bad it is. So we shall see from there. The last thing, I think they had a very good draft too. On top of that, as you said, they added more than one guy for Wentz to get the football too. So it makes me wonder now, Shawn, is he going to be back? Or are they going to just cut Bates, trade him. But if those receivers work out, Philly has the best 2 tight end set in the whole league. Everybody knows that. So, to me, if Andre Dillard can protect the blind side with the guys that they were brought in, I think this Philly O is going to be very good. Because, David, as we know, on the defensive side, even though I know Malcolm is gone, I still think with Slay coming in, I still think on the defensive side that they're going to be good. So I think Philly had a pretty good 3 days too. But David, I think you're undermining CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, Gallup, and Cooper is scary.
Oh,
And
it's extremely scary. Yeah, I agree.
And right, and if you put Zeke in the slot, that for the cross is scarier. And I don't think Philly has the secondary to match up against those 4 guys. But as you said, the Cowboys have to be in the lead to do those things. And you obviously need your defense to play well to have a lead. So I agree with you, but that offense is going to be scary. And to see those guys twice a year is going to be 2 really, really good games. But long story short, Will, I think Philly had a pretty good 3 days.
What did you think of your Titans, Shawn?
So, first round pick, Isaiah Wilson. Brooklyn born, Brooklyn bred. I was hype as hell. And the strength of the team is who? Henry. Run them. And Isaiah's run, blocking is ahead of his pass. So, I think that was a real good pick. Christian Fulton, cornerback, second round. We needed a guy there, and we got him. Darrington, then Evans, the third round. He's like a scat back. He's only like 5'9", and he's only like 195 pounds. He's really small, but he was super productive at Appalachian State, which is becoming like Boise State East.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're seeing a whole lot of Appalachian State guys come to the league and do well. So I love the pick of the guys that we and added today on the defensive line, the offensive line, really, really good. So I feel we had a real good solid day. But to me, what would complete this free agency / draft process for me is we have to find a way to bring Jadeveon Clowney in. He wants to come. We want him to come. Let's just find a contract that works and bring him in, because his most productive years was when Mike Vrabel was a defensive coordinator. Mike Vrabel was a Titans coach. David, if we get him to complete this free agency / the draft stuff, I'll feel really, really good.